On a crisp November evening in the year 2022, the historic campus of the University of Virginia was settling into a familiar rhythm. The leaf-strewn walkways and the iconic rotunda, bathed in the soft glow of lampposts, projected a sense of peace, a hallmark of this prestigious Charlottesville institution. In dorm rooms and libraries, students studied late into the night. In their homes, professors prepared lessons. A quiet anticipation for the upcoming Thanksgiving break hung in the autumn air. For nearly everyone, it was just another Sunday night. But this particular night, that profound tranquility was about to be irreparably shattered. Shortly after 10:30 in the evening on November 13th, the stillness was broken by the sharp, terrifying crack of gunshots. The sound echoed from a parking garage on Colbreth Road, an area students knew well, nestled close to university housing and athletic facilities. What had begun as an ordinary charter bus ride, a return trip from a class field trip to see a play in Washington, D.C., was about to conclude in unthinkable tragedy. The bus was filled with students, many of them members of the university's football team, their minds still filled with the cultural experience they had just shared. The easy camaraderie of the journey home would in a matter of seconds give way to sheer chaos and violence. Within minutes, the night was pierced by the wail of emergency sirens. University police alerts flashed across thousands of cell phone screens, a stark command that sent a chill through every recipient: shelter in place. An entire community, in an instant, was thrust into a waking nightmare. When the violence subsided, the toll was devastating. 3 students, Devin Chandler, Lavel Davis Junior, and Deshaun Perry, all promising young men and standout members of the Cavaliers football team, had lost their lives. 2 other students were wounded, their lives forever altered.
These were not just statistics or names on a roster. They were sons, friends, and beloved teammates, each with his own story, his own future, his own dreams, all extinguished in a place they had called home. The shock deepened when the identity of the accused shooter was revealed: Christopher Darnell Jones Junior, himself a student at the University of Virginia and a former member of the football team. The realization that the alleged perpetrator was not some unknown outsider, but one of their own, compounded the community's grief and confusion. For 12 agonizing hours, as a massive manhunt was launched, students and faculty huddled in dorms, classrooms, and libraries. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the darkness, while law enforcement agencies from across the state converged on the scene, transforming the tranquil campus into a fortress under siege. As a cold dawn broke over Charlottesville, the grim reality set in. The University of Virginia, a place renowned for its academic excellence and rich tradition, had become the latest American institution to be scarred by a mass shooting. News vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes pointed toward a campus now defined by yellow police tape and grieving faces. Tributes began to pour in from across the nation. The university's president, Jim Ryan, addressed the community with a heavy heart, describing the victims as bright, talented, and beloved. Spontaneous vigils and memorials bloomed across the grounds as classmates gathered to mourn, to remember, and to try and make sense of the senseless. The murders sent shockwaves far beyond the university's borders, forcing yet another painful national conversation about campus safety, the scourge of gun violence, and the immense pressures facing young people today.
For those who lived through it, the events of that November night will forever mark a before and an after, a stark dividing line in the history of not only the University of Virginia, but for countless communities everywhere that hold on to the fragile belief that such horrors could never happen in their own backyard. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, a wave of fear and uncertainty washed over the entire Charlottesville community. The news spread with the chilling speed of the digital age, first in fragmented texts and social media posts, then in formal alerts and overwhelming broadcast coverage. Ordinary evening routines were abandoned as a collective sense of dread took hold. Parents, hearing the news, rushed toward the campus, desperate for any word that their children were safe. Local businesses closed their doors, and the usually bustling streets emptied as residents retreated to the security of their homes, their eyes glued to screens for updates. The local police department was inundated. Emergency lines lit up with hundreds of calls from anxious citizens, reporting anything that seemed out of place: an unfamiliar vehicle, a stranger walking down their street. This surge of public concern, born of fear, was met with a massive law enforcement response. Checkpoints were established at major intersections, and patrols were visibly increased throughout the area. The entire region felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the manhunt to conclude. At the University of Virginia Medical Center, doctors and nurses worked frantically to save the 2 wounded students. The emergency room became a somber gathering place for families, friends, and teammates seeking information, their faces etched with worry. Volunteers from the community began to arrive, offering food, warm blankets, and quiet words of comfort, forming an impromptu support network in the sterile waiting rooms and hallways. Clergy members of various faiths moved among the crowds, offering prayers and solace, helping people begin to process the enormity of what had just occurred. The fear was pervasive. Across the city and its surrounding counties, families huddled together, trying to shield their children from the frightening news reports that dominated every channel. Rumors flourished online, fueled by the vacuum of verified information in the early hours. Speculation about the motive, the sequence of events, and the suspect's whereabouts added to the collective anxiety, making it difficult for anyone to distinguish fact from fiction. In response, community leaders held press conferences, their voices steady but somber, urging calm and promising transparency. They assured residents that every available resource was being dedicated to the investigation and to ensuring public safety. Local schools announced closures for the following day, both as a precaution and as a gesture of mourning, allowing the community a moment to pause and to grieve. As the manhunt stretched through the night and into the next morning, the sense of vulnerability was palpable. But amid the fear, something else began to emerge, a powerful sense of solidarity, a community drawing together in the face of unimaginable loss, determined to support one another through the darkest of times. The investigation began the moment the first officers arrived at the scene on Cobreth Road. Tracking down an active shooter is one of the most intense and high-stakes operations in law enforcement, a frantic race against time where every second counts. From the outset, detectives were faced with a scene of chaos and trauma. The primary witnesses were the terrified students who had been on the bus, many of whom knew both the victims and the suspect. Gathering clear, coherent statements from individuals still reeling from shock was an immediate and delicate challenge. Investigators had to reconstruct the timeline with painstaking precision. What happened in the moments before the shooting? What was said? What was the chain of events that led a former football player to allegedly open fire on his own-time teammates? Every detail, no matter how small, was crucial. The charter bus itself became a primary crime scene, meticulously processed by forensic teams searching for shell casings, personal belongings, and any other physical evidence that could help build an airtight case. Simultaneously, a massive manhunt was underway for Christopher Darnell Jones Junior. His name and photograph were broadcast across the state and beyond. Law enforcement agencies coordinated their efforts, sharing intelligence and deploying tactical units to locations where he might be hiding. The investigation wasn't limited to the physical search, it extended deep into the digital realm. Detectives began scouring Jones's social media profiles, communications, and university records, searching for any clue that might reveal his mindset, his motives, or his potential destination. This was a modern manhunt, blending traditional police work with digital forensics. The fact that the suspect was known to the victims provided a clear starting point, but it also introduced complex emotional and psychological layers to the investigation. This wasn't a random act of violence, it was deeply personal.
Investigators had to delve into the suspect's history with the football team, his academic performance, and any reports of prior conflicts or troubling behavior. They interviewed coaches, teammates, professors, and friends, piecing together a portrait of the young man at the center of the tragedy. The pressure on law enforcement was immense. A grieving, frightened community looked to them for answers, and most importantly, for an arrest. Every dead end, every false lead added to the tension.
The breakthrough came the following morning, nearly 12 hours after the shooting. Acting on a tip, law enforcement located Jones in Henrico County, more than 70 miles east of Charlottesville. After a brief vehicle pursuit, he was taken into custody without further incident, bringing the terrifying manhunt to a close. His arrest marked the end of the immediate threat, but it was only the beginning of a long and painful journey toward justice and understanding. The arrest of the suspect did not end the nightmare, it merely changed its form. The shadow of the tragedy settled deeply over the University of Virginia, a lingering presence felt in the quiet hallways, the empty chairs in classrooms, and the solemn faces of students. The initial shock gave way to a profound and collective grief, a pain that was both public and intensely personal. For the families of Devin Chandler, Lavel Davis Junior, and Deshaun Perry, the loss was absolute, a permanent void that could never be filled. They were now faced with the agonizing task of mourning their sons in the full glare of the national media spotlight. For the survivors, especially the 2 wounded students and those who witnessed the attack firsthand, the trauma was immediate and enduring. They carried with them the sights and sounds of that night, memories that would require immense support and time to heal. The psychological impact rippled outward, touching thousands of students who, overnight, had lost their sense of safety and security in a place they considered a sanctuary. The campus, once a symbol of aspiration and learning, was now also a site of immense sorrow. The university community responded with a powerful display of unity. Vigils were held on the South Lawn, where thousands of students, faculty, and Charlottesville residents gathered with candles, their small flames pushing back against the darkness. They stood in silence, embracing one another, sharing tears for the young men they had lost. The football program, shattered by the loss of 3 of its own, became a focal point of the community's grief. Teammates mourned their fallen brothers, grappling with a loss that went far beyond the playing field. The tragedy forced difficult but necessary conversations. Questions about the university's safety protocols, its mental health resources, and the accessibility of firearms dominated campus discussions and news reports. It served as a stark reminder that no community is immune to the epidemic of gun violence in America. The events at UVA became a case study in crisis response, campus security, and the long-term process of community healing after a traumatic event. In the weeks and months that followed, the university worked to create a legacy of remembrance. Memorials were established to honor the victims, ensuring their names and stories would not be forgotten. Scholarships were created in their honor, transforming a senseless loss into a future opportunity for other students. The phrase UVA Strong became a rallying cry, a testament to the resilience of a community determined to find light in the midst of profound darkness. The shadows of that November night may never fully recede, but the enduring spirit of remembrance and the commitment to healing continue to define the University of Virginia's path forward.